We all know the story of Rome, an empire that stood for 1,000 years, a beacon of power and civilization. We talk about its great leaders, Caesar, Augustus, men who shaped the world. But what about the one who was there at the very end? The one who watched the sun set on the Western Roman Empire for the very last time. His name is barely a whisper in the history books. He was just a boy, and his story is not one of conquest, but of a quiet, forgotten end. His name was Romulus Augustulus. A grand name, isn't it? Romulus, after the founder of Rome, and Augustus, after its first great emperor. But he was neither of those things. When he was made emperor in the year 475, he was probably only a teenager. Think about that. At an age when most young men are just starting to figure out their place in the world, he was handed the title of the most powerful man on earth. But the power was an illusion. The empire was a ghost of its former self. The borders were collapsing, the treasury was empty, and the real power wasn't in the palace. It was with the barbarian generals who commanded the army. His own father, a Roman general named Orestes, was the one who put him on the throne. Not for the good of Rome, but for his own ambition. Romulus was a pawn in a game he was too young to understand. So what was his life like? We can only imagine. He probably lived in the imperial palace in Ravenna, surrounded by marble and mosaics. He would have worn the finest purple silks, the color of emperors. But it must have been a lonely existence. A gilded cage. While other boys might have been learning a trade or playing games, he was performing rituals, sitting through endless, meaningless ceremonies. Did he feel the weight of it all? Or was he just a kid, wishing he could be somewhere else? You have to wonder if he ever looked out at the city and saw the cracks, not just in the buildings, but in the very foundation of his world. The man who would bring it all to an end wasn't a Roman. He was a chieftain of the Germanic tribes who made up most of the Roman army. His name was Odoacer. He was a soldier, a leader, a man who had earned his power. For years, these Germanic soldiers had fought for Rome. They defended its borders, and they were promised land in Italy as payment for their service. But Romulus's father, Orestes, refused to honor that promise. It was a fatal mistake. The soldiers, led by Odoacer, revolted. They had the swords, they had the strength, and they were tired of being treated as outsiders. The end came quickly. Odoacer and his army marched on the capital, Ravenna. There was no epic, final battle for Rome like you see in the movies. There was no grand last stand. The city was protected by marshes, but Odoacer's forces were too strong. Orestes, the proud father who had placed his son on the throne, was captured and executed. And just like that, the boy emperor was left all alone, facing the man who now controlled his destiny. Imagine that moment. A teenage boy, stripped of his guards, his father gone, standing before this powerful warrior who held the fate of the empire in his hands. This is the part of the story that always gets me. Odoacer could have had him killed. It was the Roman way, the way of power. You eliminate your rivals. But he didn't. The historical accounts say that when Odoacer saw Romulus, he took pity on him because of his youth. He saw not an emperor, not a threat, but just a boy caught in the storm of history. So, instead of a death sentence, Odoacer did something remarkable. He let him live. He forced him to abdicate, to officially give up the throne on September 4th, 476. That was the day the Western Roman Empire officially ended. Not with a bang, but with the signature of a boy. And what happened to the last emperor? He wasn't imprisoned. He wasn't hidden away. Odoacer sent Romulus and his family to a comfortable estate in the countryside near Naples. He was even given a pension, a yearly sum of money to live on. He went from being the emperor of Rome to a private citizen, living in a beautiful villa overlooking the bay. In a way, it might have been the greatest gift he ever received. He was freed from a role he never asked for. He was given a chance to have a life. A real life, away from the plotting and the politics that had cost his father everything. History largely forgets Romulus Augustulus after this. He just fades away. He lived out his days in that villa. We don't know for how long. Some sources say he was still alive 30 or 40 years later. Can you imagine him as a man in his 50s? Did he tell his own children or grandchildren that he was once the emperor of Rome? Or was it a secret he kept? Did he ever feel bitter about what he lost? Or did he feel gratitude for what he gained? A long, peaceful life. Something no other emperor in that chaotic final century was ever granted. He is called the last emperor, but maybe a better title is the survivor. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event. It was a long, slow decline. But we humans, we like clear endings. We need a final chapter. And that boy, Romulus Augustulus, became the symbol of that ending. His story isn't about glory or power. It's about the human side of history. It reminds us that these huge, world-changing events are experienced by real people. A father's ambition, a soldier's demand for respect, and a boy's quiet fate. His story tells us that sometimes the greatest victory is not winning a throne, but simply surviving its collapse and finding peace on the other side. So the next time you hear about the mighty Roman Empire, think of the boy with the grand name who was there at the very end. The forgotten emperor. The one who wasn't a conqueror or a tyrant, but simply the last one to turn out the lights. And in a strange way, by being forced to give up everything, he may have been the only one who truly escaped the fall of Rome.